Hey everybody, it's the Olsen family. Welcome back to another episode from Carl's Cycle Supply. Thanks for joining us today, and thank you to everybody who has liked, commented, and subscribed after our first two videos. Today we'll be going over a 1938 Harley-Davidson EL Bobber, built by Matt Olsen of Carl's Cycle Supply.
This is the third official year of production for Harley's OHV model. They manufactured 2,478 units between the high compression EL model and the low compression E model. This was about a 20% increase in volume. The motor company was wise to learn from its previous year's mistake by only offering two colors initially. On this year's model release, you had 5 colors to choose from, including teak red, Venetian blue, Hollywood green, silver tan, and export green. 17 years later, Harley would recycle the Hollywood green name, but the color changed. The most noticeable change for 38 was the new striping layout. The tank artwork had a single stripe going directly through the decal. Most 38s had a hand-painted vertical black stripe at the beginning and the end of each decal. The striping on the fenders migrated from the top of the fender to the sides. This creates an even larger visual impact while making the bike look long, low, and ultra sleek. When these bikes are parked next to a 36 or 39, they look like they're going 60 miles an hour on the kickstand. It is a really cool effect, and it was a smart move on Harley's part. The engineers continued to beef up and improve the frame in 1938. The cross brace that the seat post connects into was widened to strengthen the base of the frame. The engineers also incorporated welding into the assembly process of putting the frames together. The front motor mount, floorboard mounts, and top rails began being welded together compared to the previous years where they were just tack welded and then sweat brazed. Let's talk about a small change that came out that affected most parts of the bike from front to back. In 1938, Harley implemented a new fitting for greasing pivot points and bushings. The Alamite fitting was replaced by the new grease zerk fitting. Both fittings did the same thing, but the tool for injecting the grease was more user-friendly for the zerk. The 5/16 32 holes for grease zerks changed location on the fork, rear brake pedal, brake crossover shaft, and front brake backing plate. Other small upgrades and changes include new flared oil lines and oil tank fittings, and a new dash cover with a revised side plate, making it easier to take on and off. The speedometer face was upgraded and now features 2-mile increments as opposed to the previous year's 5-mile increments. It's the same color, same trip meter as 37, but a new, more precise gauge for reading. By 1938, Harley had turned all the doubters into believers. The motorcycling public understood that the OHV model was here to stay. It was predictable, it was powerful, it was fast, and reliable. Harley solved the biggest issue with their 36 and 37 engines in 1938 when they incorporated stamped steel covers that completely enclosed the rocker arms. The lower covers were painted black and the top covers were parkerized. They are held together with special 832 Philister head screws. In 1939, they started using self-tapping screws with hex heads. Another big improvement in the top end was the reinforced tabs on the heads for holding the rocker arm shafts in place. The return lines on the lower tins increased in size from 3/16 to 1/4 of an inch. This change, along with the valve covers, allowed Harley to discontinue the blowout fitting on the front rocker box from the previous year. 1938 was also the first year for warning lights on the dash. This required a new system for confirming your bike had oil pressure. In 1938, all models were equipped with the new oil pressure switch. The biggest and best new feature for 38 big twin transmissions was the introduction of the new throwout bearing. It was fully enclosed and no longer had to be held on the pushrod with a snap ring. The additional feature that Harley incorporated in 38, riveting a little stamped steel plate on the inside that would catch oil from the spinning main shaft and direct it down onto the throwout bearing to make it last longer and live happier. The clutch discs were modernized by eliminating individual steel and fiber plates and incorporating 2 steel plates with fibers riveted to each side. Fewer moving parts means less pieces to gum up and to service. Let's talk about clutch pedals next. Harley had 3 different clutch pedal arrangements in 1938. Early bikes had a short pedal, very similar to 1936 and 37. After that, they came out with a pedal that was placed higher and had a longer range of rotation for easier use. The mid-series pedal has an attachment point down at the very bottom where the clutch rod attaches. Later on in that same year, Harley moved the pin up for attaching the clutch rod, and this is where it stayed for the rest of the years that they had foot clutch pedals on motorcycles. Before I talk about this bike in this specific video, I want to take a little second to talk about an amazing book that had a huge influence and impact on my life when I was younger. The book is Harley-Davidson by Herbert Wagner. Herbert Wagner did an awesome job 20 years ago of tracking down a bunch of original old bike owners when they were new. He got their photos, he got notes, he got the serial numbers. He interviewed people at the factory to understand the development of the Knucklehead and the culture of Milwaukee and surrounding areas. I loved this book when it came out, and I couldn't get enough of looking at it. I've probably bought 20 copies over the years and given them to friends and customers just because I'm so in love with it. Thank you, Herbert Wagner. This book is amazing. Now, let's narrow it down a little bit even more. I'd like to show you a really cool picture of a 1937 Knucklehead set up to race at a hill climb or a scramble or something. This bike is very cool. It's painted like a 38 with the stripe going through the tanks. You can tell it's a 37 because of the oil tank and oil line plug-ins. If you look at the bike, you see it has really cool handlebars, really cool bob fenders, and just looks racy and like tons of fun. If you squint at it even more, you see some under-the-light seats, so you know that they were riding it around like this instead of just stripping it for competition over the weekend. I've loved this picture and it's stuck in my mind for a long, long time. Let's talk about the bike that we're featuring in this video. A couple years ago, a friend of mine in Texas asked me to help him find a rare teens American 4-cylinder. Luckily, I had another friend on the East Coast that was selling the bike that he was looking for. I introduced them, they became friends, and a good deal was made to exchange ownership of the bike. My East Coast friend set me up with the blue tank as a gift for helping sell his bike. He had gotten the tank from one of my mentors when I was younger. The mentor was Kenny Presson. When most kids are in middle school and calling girls every week, I was calling Kenny and asking him Knucklehead questions. We were good friends, he was very gracious with his knowledge and information, and even one time on Christmas break I remember taking a Greyhound bus to go hang out and work with him. It's got a lot of good memories with Kenny, and I was excited to get this tank that used to be his. It would be an understatement to say that the tank was full of sentimental value. I knew I needed to build a cool 38 around this very special tank. I found the cases for sale on the AMCA Facebook page. They were busted up like 40 and 41 cases and located in Europe. I bought them knowing they were worth saving and would be good as new with a little bit of welding and machine work. The top end is actually for a long-term 37 project. I found the correct heads and will swap them out someday. The manifold is a cool old custom one that has a 4-bolt flange added to the original smaller early manifold casting. The bottom end is 74 stroke with original rods and custom pistons with a different pin to crown height. Cam is a Line Weber number 1 that has more overlap than stock but isn't too radical. It runs good and is a fun combination. The exhaust is pretty much stock. I made the muffler and put a low brow tip on the end of it. I welded the crimped on reducers to the body to make it look like a muffler was old and had been repaired over the years. I kinda just closed my eyes and welded it so it looked more like a stick weld. The rims are 19-inch VL rims, laced to star hubs. The fork is a later 38 fork with the outward facing grease zerks and broached fork stem. The handlebar forging is original, and the bars are some bends that my friend Tom bent up for me by looking at the picture. I brazed them in place and matched it to where it was comfortable and looked like the Ray Tursky photo that we talked about earlier. The fenders are some reproduction ones that were not good enough to use on restorations, so I cut them up to look like the bike in the Herbert Wagner book. I sent the fenders and gas tanks to a painter in Japan to match them to the original paint left tank. He made a right side tank decal to match the age and wear of the original paint left decal. I think he did a fantastic job. Now you're picking up the theme of this being a fun bike that I put together out of parts. When I started compiling the stuff I was going to use on this bike, I had a pretty decent early 38 frame that needed a toolbox strap and a seat post replaced. I found out about a 38 frame that a friend of mine in the Midwest had been in an accident on. The frame was really tough, one of the toughest I'd ever seen. The story goes that my friend was waiting to turn left on a road and was rear-ended. He was bucked off of the bike, and the motorcycle flew into oncoming traffic and hit a truck coming the other direction. When the dust settled, my friend was okay, but both cars and the bike were totaled. Even though I had a better frame, it would be fun to bring this relic back from the dead and ride the heck out of it. I had to take every tube out of every forging and straighten the harvested forgings out, fixture it up, and fit new tubes. I got the new tubes from my friend Jason Sheets out east. Everything went well on the frame project. I ended up being able to use all the forgings except for the right axle casting. The axle had been pulled through the forging in the accident. I think I could have fixed it, but thought it would be cool to save as a memento for how blown out the frame started out as. During the 3 weeks it took for the sheet metal to get shipped back to the US, I found an original paint tail flap and front fender. I'll eventually end up putting them on this bike, but I'm having so much fun enjoying it the way it is and riding it as an original period correct bobber.
Thanks for watching! If you love old motorcycles and would love to follow along on our old motorcycle builds, please hit the like and subscribe. Stay tuned for our next episode where we'll be going over a 1939 Harley-Davidson EO built by Carl Cycle Supply.